don't grow because you think you need to be better. Grow because you love to grow. And then this is a really powerful phrase, okay? Once you both have, the point of a conflict is not to win or lose. It's just to understand. And when you understand, it's an amazing seed for growth. Again, just think back to as a baby, imagine if you were just put into one side and not cared for, you were different, you wouldn't have grown, you wouldn't be here. So it's so deep within our physiology, our psyche, that's very important. See, self-compassion, it separates the person and the behavior. This is what self-compassion does. It doesn't say you are wrong, you are a problem, you are not good enough. It says, okay, BJ, that behavior, it could have been better, awareness of suffering.
In this podcast, my mission is to bombard you with the crazy personal transformation ideas. And today's episode, we talk all about compassion. You will get to learn how compassion can really, really help and fuel your personal growth. How compassion can help you resolve the conflict within yourself and in the relationships that you have with people. And also you will learn a technique which can not only save 10 hours a week for you, but also help you instill new habits. And in this episode, joining me is Dr. Nilesh Satguru. Nilesh is a high-performance coach to award-winning charity founders, serial entrepreneurs, executives, authors, artists, podcasters, and coaches. Nilesh was featured by Entrepreneur magazine, among so many other magazines. He writes and talks about compassion and high performance. And in this episode of the Inspiring Talk podcast, I'm super, super excited to be bringing this insight for you. This conversation is pure gold. And trust me when I say this, because I personally learned a lot from this episode. Let's get started. Welcome back inside yet another episode of the Inspiring Talk podcast, and I'm super excited to have with me Dr. Nilesh Satguru. Nilesh, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, BJ. I love your energy.
Thank you so much for being here. And, as I was telling you offline, I reached out to Shamal, whose episode was really, really appreciated in this podcast, and said, Shamal, is there someone whom I should bring on the podcast? And he said, hey, you know what, Dr. Nilesh, you need to get him on your podcast because he's just amazing with everything that he does. So I'm going to jump straight into this. And Nilesh, you have been, working. Your work in the past few years is completely focused on compassion and tying that with high performance. So I want to, in this episode, talk everything about compassion and what it is and how it really can help us get better in our life. So why don't we begin with understanding of what is compassion? Other than it's a beautiful word that I love, what exactly is compassion? What do we mean when we say compassion?
Well, thank you, and it's such a pleasure to be here. So the best way I can describe this is a very simple analogy. I can give you the definition as well in a minute. But compassion sits innate within every single one of our bodies, our beings, our hearts. And it's a desire to show an awareness of other people's suffering, challenges, and the intention to relieve that. So when a mother cares for a child, that is the essence of compassion. It's innate within us. The last thing I say is, without compassion, you would not be here. If your caregivers had no compassion for you, you would not have been nurtured, you would not have been loved, you would not have been cared for, you could not have grown. And we'll get onto this later, but I had a great conversation with a neuroscientist last night, and now we understand more and more that compassion leads to neuroplasticity, growth mindset. So I know that's going to be really exciting for all your listeners.
So you're saying that, compassion is gonna help with the neuroplasticity? Like what happens? Like let's get into that. Okay, what happens on our brain when we are being compassionate, when we are thinking of others, or like you said, compassion being an intention to help, make someone else's life better, or help, alleviate the pain of someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I use compassion, BJ, I use it in both senses of the word. I use it in self-compassion towards ourselves. Because remember, the heart, it needs to fill its own coronary arteries before it pumps blood out to the rest of the body. And we are exactly the same. Compassion for ourselves first, and then compassion for others. We'll get into the neuroscience, but like I said, definition is showing an awareness of suffering and taking action to relieve that suffering, whether that's for you or someone else. How does this lead to neuroplasticity? Well, it's truly fascinating, but essentially what we know from studies is that shame, the voice of self-criticism, self-blame, self-loathing, shuts off the learning centers of our brain. Think about it. If you think about the basic physiology of mammals, of humans like us, and we have our nervous system split into two. We have fight or flight, and we have rest and digest. Now, we are not usually growing if we're in a state of perpetual stress. And so the way our brain and our bodies manage our emotional systems, that basically makes your mind more flexible, more malleable, and as a consequence, leaves more room for growth and development.
Got it. And you mentioned about, self-criticism and shame. Why do you think we criticize ourselves a lot? If we really look at the amount of criticism that we do to ourselves versus, we do to someone else, it's always that we criticize ourselves normally, like, way more than we do to someone else. We are not too kind with words when it comes to ourselves. Like, why do you think we are so critical of ourselves all the time?
Fantastic question. And I just want to share a story with all of your listeners, because I've been really blessed to work from everybody who's suffering with addiction and mental health problems. When I was a doctor, people who were suicidal, to people who have built, £1 million businesses, multiple businesses, people who have been in Olympic weightlifting teams, people who have authored books. And everybody criticizes themselves, no matter what anyone says. Once you become aware of it, once you actually become mindful of your thoughts, you realize that this is what makes us human. And why? Well, because our mind is wired to keep us safe. So the first thing to know and to do is to say that this isn't a bad thing. I want you to just say this one simple phrase: just like me. Just like me, that person criticizes themselves. Just like me, that person struggles. Just like me, that person is going through hard times. And you see, if you think about, I'm not Buddhist, but I love to go back to the ancient wisdom roots. And if you think about Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology, it says any negative emotion we feel, whether it's shame, blame, anger, fear, worry, it all stems from us feeling separate. So do you see with that phrase, just like me, you no longer feel separate in that moment. And this is the essence of compassion for ourselves, compassion for others. One of the most powerful things, BJ, I'm sure you know this, running the podcast and having a community, most powerful things for behavioral change is having people around you who are going through the same changes as you, right?
Yeah.
I imagine that's why you set this up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to what you've said, every single time when I started out, I used to feel like, hey, I'm no good at all, and here are these amazing people that I'm getting to have conversation with. And the more and more people I started having conversation with, and when I started going a layer deeper beyond just the surface level and started scratching a little deeper, and understand people a layer deeper. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm not alone. Like you said, like just like me, this person is a billionaire, but this person has, is critical of themselves as well. This person is such an amazing artist. There are like millions of people celebrating this person, but this person doubts himself or herself as well, right?
Yes.
And I can't completely
Yes.
agree to what you said. Like, hey, just like me. Yeah, please go on.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how powerful that phrase is, and this aligns to something in the psychological research from Professor Kristen Neff, who's one of the pioneers of self-compassion. It's something called common humanity, which is an essential truth that we all struggle, we all have setbacks, we all suffer, and that's what connects our human experience. So we no longer have to attach a negative meaning to our struggles anymore. Again, the best analogy I can use from Buddhist texts is that the lotus flower, the beautiful lotus flower, it cannot be sustained without the mud that sits underneath it. So now when you're in traffic, or you don't make that sale, or you get rejected in your love life, you stop looking at the mud as a bad thing, and you start looking at it as an opportunity for personal transformation and growth. And I will dive into stories. I mean, there's essentially 4 huge stories that shaped who I was and got into this. A patient complaint, my son's developmental challenges, my father's chronic illnesses, and his death, and me resigning from a medical practice. I had 37 years of job security. But the one that really opened my eyes to the power of compassion was this patient complaint. And in essence, I was working as a medical doctor in the UK, and I was stressed, BJ. I was so stressed. I was frustrated. I was like a caged animal working there, because I saw that it took 33 days for a patient to see the doctor routinely. If it wasn't urgent, you had to wait 33 days in this surgery. And it really affected me. I didn't like it. So I was trying to lead this change in the appointment system. But my clinical compassion was actually reducing. And there was one event, one lady came in her 50s, and I saw something that day that needed urgent attention.
And when you say your clinical compassion was decreasing, is it because you saw so many cases on a day-to-day basis, it started becoming routine for you?
Yeah, that could be one of the reasons. I also genuinely believe that it was kind of the system was molding it out of me. I was allowing myself to be molded by the system, which, exactly as you said, was thinking about seeing people faster, more people, doing things at pace and at speed without care. But I'll never forget this patient, because they were a high functioning entrepreneur and they had headaches, and they could see something in their vision with these headaches. So I thought, right, that needs to be attended to today by the eye hospital. So I sent them to the eye hospital. But the truth is, I didn't really show awareness of their suffering. I didn't understand the meaning of their circumstances, and I didn't take action to relieve their specific suffering. This is the essence of compassion. And the patient wrote a really nasty complaint about me. And so I sat there in reflection, because I didn't like the person I was becoming. And that was the most powerful seed for growth. After that, I was on a mission to learn about compassion, to meditate on compassion, to bring it into my daily life. And also it led me to the conclusion that really it is the ultimate skill, whether you're healing from suffering or whether you're into personal transformation, it really is the ultimate skill.
So, Nilesh, what's the difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion? Like, how are they different?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking this question, because there's a real important difference. And I think what I was describing a little bit in my medical work, I was too much focused on empathy and sometimes sympathy and not compassion. And actually that was leading me to burnout. So this is based in the psychological research, and it's based on neuroscience. And again, we can use an analogy. So if you saw someone drowning in the water and you jumped in to save them, but you didn't know how to swim, then you too would start drowning. That in essence is sympathy. It's when you are physically moved by someone else's pain and suffering, but you don't really act on it. You definitely don't really think about it from their perspective. You're just physically moved by their suffering. It's important sympathy. I'm not saying that it's not important. Empathy is you sitting on the side of the pier where the person's jumped into the water, and you imagine, oh my gosh, this must be really difficult for them because they're suffering in the water and they're drowning. But you don't act. You're just imagining.
And maybe
It's
you are
effortful.
maybe you are feeling the like how they must be feeling, and you might be taking on that emotion thing, but you haven't done anything.
Correct.
You are there with them,
absolutely.
but you haven't done anything.
And you're imagining. This is the other really important thing that we see in the research, is that empathy is actually effortful. Right? So it takes you to actually think in their shoes. How must they be feeling? It's not something that happens completely naturally, although it's an important skill. Now, compassion is you doing the empathy, feeling it, seeing that they're suffering, imagining how much it must be a challenge, and you offering a hand. Now, this is where it gets really exciting, and I get really excited about the science, but there's a different brain signature to empathy and compassion, and this is based on research from the Max Planck Institute in Germany. So they train people in empathy, they train people in compassion, and they put them through these amazing things called functional MRI scanners, while showing them images of people's faces who are suffering. And essentially what they found is that the people who are trained in compassion, the area of the brain that lit up is the areas associated with joy, reward, care, and love. Whereas empathy, the area of the brains that lit up, is what's associated with suffering. So it's so incredibly powerful. There's a joy in giving, there's a joy in helping that sits innate within our core. And that's what compassion taps into.
Oh, that's beautifully explained, and you are saying that giving, the joy of giving, and I think how we feel when we do something for someone else is also sort of associated with what you have just shared, right? Maybe the same part of brain, sort of get activated when we are doing something for someone else. Now, you are not just feeling for someone else, but you are also doing something to alleviate the pain, or help them get out of that situation. So Nilesh, you talk about compassionate change maker. What does that mean? Who is a compassionate change maker? Is it somebody who sort of, like you said, who helps alleviate someone else's pain by not only empathizing but also taking action and sort of help someone else to get out of that pain?
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you asked this question. When I was off on this mission to elevate entrepreneurs and change makers to their best, by helping them better care for themselves, their staff, and their families, I started to interview people just like you. And I started to look for these core characteristics, because compassion was amazing. However, I would find that, let's say, some people who were really compassionate, they were very intuitive, but the fact that they were so intuitive meant that they were helping so many different people that it wasn't really in a focused direction. It wasn't like, this is my niche, this is how I help people, this is how I go deep so I can make a profound difference. But I did find these amazing groups of people, usually in the wellness or personal growth industry, just like you, who, the way I like to describe them is there's someone who's focused on creating a loving dent in the universe. So they have a clear direction, whatever that may be. This could be through the way that they express their artwork, or the way they do music, or it could be even someone who's an executive, let's say, the way they manage their team. But it's all motivated, like I say, by love, by the absolute love of giving, helping people. And often people look at them and they go, oh my God, how do you have the energy to do that? How have you done that? And they turn around and they say, because I love it. And so these people, Shamalal's one of them, So are you, all of you, you beautiful people who are focused on serving others by creating a loving dent in the universe. That's a compassionate change maker.
Nilesh, to the previous context of how empathy and compassion is sort of different in the terms that you take some action to help the person alleviate the pain, right, and the suffering. And now I want to talk from not from like a physical suffering where you can help somebody by maybe extending your resources. Maybe that could be your time, or that could be your energy, or that could be your money. That's the one thing, right? So more from the perspective of like self growth, where I need something that I need to heal, and you like you. So I'll take an example, right? I had a friend who struggled big time with alcoholism, right? And
Right.
he knew that he needed to get out of it. And I tried to, be as empathetic as possible. I tried to, like, obviously I'm not an expert who can help him come out of it. Like, I'm not a doctor, or I don't have any resources to help him come out of that. But, like, I tried my best to sort of direct him to people or the resources who can help him to get out of that situation, right? Don't you think it's the responsibility of the person to, I'm talking completely from the personal growth perspective, is it not the person's responsibility to sort of work on alleviating their own suffering? And unless the person is willing to, no matter how hard you try to help someone, you will not be able to help that person, no matter how compassionate you might be, unless the person is willing to. Don't you think it's the responsibility of the person?
It's such a beautiful question, and I'm going to challenge you because I think often when we come into conflicts, both parties are right. But I'm going to challenge your vocabulary, and this is something that I love to do because I'm open to you doing it to me too, because sometimes these words slip out. When you said you're trying to help someone, what do you feel when you say that? When you're trying to help someone, is it effortful or is it effortless? Is it something that you're loving doing? Or is it something that you're resisting, you're fighting against it, you're wanting something, and you're clinging onto a perceived result that is out of our hands? So you are right. Your wound isn't your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. Absolutely. However, what many of us suffer with, and this is, let me share a story. So I have an amazing client who I've been working with now for almost 2 years. Now, he came from a very rough background, yet he has achieved phenomenal things in business success. He's got multiple businesses in property and in hospitality. And, on the outside, he's somebody who's made it, right? But he came from a violent, when he was younger. The house wasn't violent, but his friends were. He was in that kind of mentality. And I'm talking to him about compassion. Now you can imagine this person's a really large, well-built man in his 50s, and I'm talking to him about compassion because what still bothers a lot of us is other people's emotional reactions. The most compassionate thing you can learn to do is to sit in an uncomfortable space with somebody whilst they're suffering and just give them your loving, connected presence and attention. Now, I'm not going to claim that this is easy, but I know from a neuroscience perspective, what we said at the start, when you are around people who make you feel calm, connected, cared for, you can start to learn these practices. So what happened? Well, look, with this client, he had become estranged from he has 7 children. He'd become estranged from 2 or 3 of the children. You can imagine how painful that is. Now, we meet frequently. We talk about compassion. I am there to essentially challenge his thinking, make him see things that he can't see in himself, reconsolidate memories and say, are you sure you want to see it that way? Well, he's healed nearly all of his family relationships from going from not talking to them to talking to them. And in his testimonial, he said, you can't put a price on those things. And this is the real power of compassion. When I was working as a doctor, I see people at the end of their lives, Vijay, they would say that there are a lot of different regrets. I know there's a book on this, but this is my personal experience. The two things that people would say that they regretted the most was, number one, they didn't heal painful family relationships, and number two, they didn't have the courage to follow your dreams. And compassion helps you do both of those things.
I'll come to how compassion helps somebody to heal those relationships and accomplish any goals, or chasing the dream. But before that, you mentioned about self-compassion. Is it possible for somebody to be compassionate for someone else without being compassionate to yourself first?
Absolutely. 100%. In fact, most of us don't have to try to be compassionate with other people. We are innately compassionate. It's been with us since we're born, and especially to our family. But what is a real struggle is, remember, when we are completely dependent as children, there is no self-compassion because we're completely dependent. But as we grow up, we learn to be the compassionate presence that our parents were for ourselves. And there are some myths about self-compassion. I'd like to share a few of them now because they're really important, okay? I'm just going to go out and just list them all off. And I know this might trigger some people, but I say it with love because it's important that we change the way we think about it. And again, this isn't just my opinion. This is based in research, okay? This is based in research from the States and the UK and esteemed universities. Number one, self-compassion is not weak. Self-compassion is not unambitious or lazy. Self-compassion is not selfish. It is not self-indulgent. And these are really what sits at the essence of self-compassion. Last of all, you're not going to be judged for being self-compassionate. And I would say if you are, then, that's usually because of people wishing that they could be more compassionate with themselves, and they're watching you and they're wishing for that. So these are the myths that people that we all, and every day I challenge these for myself, because I also work through these things. I can't sit here and say that that's it. I'm now the perfect beacon of self-compassion. Of course not. So self-compassion is not unambitious. It's not lazy. It's not weak. It's not self-indulgent. It's not pitiful. It's not selfish. These are all myths.
So give us an example of what being self-compassionate looks like.
Great. Yeah.
Maybe you can give through a common mistake that we make, or maybe something that we beat a lot on, then how we can probably sort of redirect that or change that narrative, and instead of being too critical of ourselves, maybe start practicing self-compassion.
You got it. You explain that so beautifully. I'm always listening for your words, and it is about redirecting. That's it. And that is the ultimate skill. Just for a minute, let's just pause and sit in awe and wonder. Everyone who's listening to this right now, just push pause and notice how our unique human ability is that there's millions of bits of information right now that we could pay attention to. Right now, I could be looking at how beautiful this tree is out there and the leaves on there. Or I could be looking at the papers on my desk that I need to do, the contracts that need to be signed. But that is amazing, isn't it? That's our ability to redirect our attention. And this is the essence of mindfulness, self-compassion, that they're very interlinked and very closely related. And every day is training. Neuroscience tells us this. Every day we practice at redirecting our attention onto what we wish to grow, and we move our attention away from what we do not wish to grow. It is as simple as this. It's very challenging. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's simple as this. So what a lot of people, I'm going to take an example, because a lot of people forget that, let's say if you're critical about others, the world, a lot of people forget that actually that too is harmful. People say, well, I'm not being critical about myself, but I'm criticizing someone else or blaming someone else. I'm blaming the world in my head. And let me just explain this phrase. When you criticize, complain, or condemn, you are both the attacker and the attacked. There's a neurochemical reaction that goes off in our mind when we start to think negatively. Why? It's because negative thoughts are amazing. They're designed to keep us safe. So they are helpful. They serve a purpose and a role. But it's like Velcro. Negative thoughts like Velcro for our mind, they're sticky. And the more we practice that, the more difficult it is. And you've been around some of these people, right? Where it's very, very hard. You get so used to practicing a certain way of thinking, it becomes very hard for you to see a different way of going about things. So let's say, for example, you're at home and your partner is late for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And this triggers you, okay? You start to feel some anger, some frustration, some blame, some shame. Now, what I encourage everybody to do at this point is push pause and listen to the voice that comes after the trigger. Okay, so research from Harvard, Jill Bolt Taylor, says that an emotion in our body and our brain will only last 90 seconds. This is so profound, guys. The emotion only lasts 90 seconds. So the blame, the shame, the anger, the guilt, that's not the problem. That's not the problem. We all experience that.
Yeah.
But the story we attach to that, the self-talk that we go through after that,
I always
maybe
do
something
this.
like,
I always do this.
go ahead. Why don't you work through it with me? This is going to be more fun if we work through it together. So as someone's late for dinner, what's the self-talk like for you then?
Yeah, I mean, it could be something like, hey, this person doesn't value me much, right? You know, this person always does this to me, and that always is such a destructive, like, you know, Tom, like you said that, you know, never ever this person ever, you know, respects you, and that's such a, you know, such a destructive thought that you can plant on your head, right?
Exactly. And I'm going to vulnerably share because I've worked through a lot of these things as well. So for me, I realized that when I followed the thread of my self-talk back and back and back and back, it came down to just a few things, which is that, am I valued? Am I respected? Am I loved? Am I appreciated? These are the things for me. And I can pick out specific instances when these meanings were created. You know how powerful this is? Because like I said, again, neuroscience, anything in terms of memory, anything that we do, we say memory as, you know, a past event. That's how we use it in layman's terms. But to a neuroscientist, a memory is anything that we know how to do. You know, whether it's writing as a memory, thinking, the way we view ourselves can be consolidated in memory. And we go from short-term memory to long-term memory. And that's called consolidation of memory. But what we now know from neuroscience is that we can change memories by revisiting them.
Okay.
And this is why compassion's so powerful, right? Because you're more likely to be able to change your memory for the positive, from suffering to growth, when you're in this self-compassionate space. So I had these beliefs, you know, I'm not valued, I'm not cared for, I'm not respected. And you can see now how, let's say if my wife, I ask her a question and she doesn't respond, you see the story that then comes up and everything tenses up. You get angry and you go, you don't understand me. You don't get me. And we've all been there, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've all been there. We've all done these things. But it's just a story.
So are you also saying that compassion help us resolve conflicts?
Yes, absolutely. That's a fantastic takeaway, BJ. You're doing a wonderful job. Do you know why it helps us resolve conflicts? Let me go through my 3 A's of compassion, which I kind of mentioned earlier, but with that patient complaint. After the patient complaint, I started to read up and I read work from the Dalai Lama's translator. He also runs a course at Stanford University on compassion cultivation training. And these 3 A's are kind of drawn from that. The first A is an awareness of suffering. Okay, so you show an awareness of suffering. The second A is you show an agreement with the meaning of their circumstances. This is the understanding, the common humanity element of things. With a phrase like, just like sense, or just like me, you're just like me. And then the third is action taken to relieve the suffering. Okay, so awareness of suffering, agreement with the meaning, and last of all, action taken to relieve the suffering. So now you can see how this plays out in a conflict, right? Your partner, your spouse, your mom, your dad, your loved one, they're getting angry with you. Just like you, they are feeling some negative emotions. And you felt negative emotions too, right? So you dig a little deeper. You try and understand what's the circumstances behind them being angry.
Mm.
And you might say something like, I hear you. I hear you're upset, and just help me understand. Can you share with me a little bit more about that? And then they might share. By the way, this is an important thing to mention. Sometimes our physiology is a bit too hopped up for us to even be able to find the reasons for why we're annoyed.
Mm.
And in that case, it's just space and distance. You try and stay emotionally unmoved. And then once you're both in a bit more of a calm space, you can try and explore the reasons. And then this is a really powerful phrase, okay? Once you both have, the point of a conflict is not to win or lose. It's just to understand. And when you understand, it's an amazing seed for growth, right? So for example, I shared with you that the story I had in my head was that I'm not valued, respected, loved. So if I share that with someone, then they can somehow understand that if maybe they don't acknowledge me, that might affect me more than it affects them. That's the story in my head. So you're both trying to understand one another. But the phrase at the end, which is the most powerful seed for growth, is I feel, then the emotion, about the situation. And then this is the bit that a lot of us struggle with. I would like. So it's really soft. It's just saying the change that you would like in the future. And this is something that, I work through with my clients, but also with my loved ones. I feel, about, I would like.
I think that's really, really, powerful sort of phrase to say, like, this is what I feel and this is what I would like. And that's, I think, is a respectful way to put how you feel and what you would like,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as many people know, using the word you, that implies separation. And so we basically grow when we feel connected, when we feel like we're not different and we're understood, we're cared for. Again, just think back to as a baby, imagine if you were just put into one side and not cared for, you were different, you wouldn't have grown, you wouldn't be here. So it's so deep within our physiology, our psyche, that's very important.
If I am way too compassionate with myself, say that, hey BJ, it's all right, you failed, it's all right, it's okay, let it be, be a little kinder to yourself. And then something else happens, it's okay, leave it there, don't stress, let it be there. If I'm doing this over and over again, you mentioned that, you said that this is one of the myths, and I want you to take this up now.
Yeah.
If I'm constantly, being compassionate with myself and forgiving myself, don't you think that will lead to sort of me not taking action? So let me articulate this better. How self-compassion and accountability, because I want to be compassionate with myself and I don't want to be harsh on myself. At the same time, I want to accomplish and achieve results without being too hard and harsh on myself. How is that possible?
And thank you. And you articulated it beautifully. I think it's a really big myth in the personal growth world. I know a lot of people are here because they want to be better. And I get that. I'm like that too. But let me just deliver one phrase, and I want, I tattoo this into my mind, okay? Don't grow because you think you need to be better. Grow because you love to grow. Don't grow because you think you need to be better. Grow because you love to grow. You see how different that is? You see how you can enjoy the process? This is ancient wisdom. This is essentially what the Bhagavad Gita tells us, or from China, the Tao Te Ching. It says, do your work, then step back. This is the only path to serenity. But so many of us, we get caught in that. And, you know, this is something that I've had to it's been a profound shift for me. So but people think self-compassion is without action. And remember, it's not. It's this 3-step process. So you are right that you do forgive yourself, but you also ask the question, what can I learn? What do I need? You see how this is etched into the growth mindset. See, self-compassion, it separates the person and the behavior. Many of you will know Carol Dweck's work on the 2 main mindsets. Essentially, growth mindset leads to better health, reduced anxiety and depression, better success across really all the domains, and fixed mindset, it doesn't. Why? Because you separate the person from the performance. This is what self-compassion does. It doesn't say you are wrong, you are a problem, you are not good enough. It says, okay, BJ, that behavior, it could have been better, awareness of suffering. But guess what? You failed. Hey, I heard Peter Diamandis say that he got 150 no's before he went and got 10 million for the X Prize Foundation. So well done. You're on the right path. You got to know you failed. That's okay. Now, what can I learn? How can I move forward? So growth mindset, we see how self-compassion leads to growth mindset, right? Growth mindset's embracing challenges, persisting in the face of setbacks, being inspired by other people's success, learning from criticism, and seeing effort as the path to mastery. These are the 5 core principles of a growth mindset. And essentially, self-compassion asks the same question. It says that I'm going to grow because I love to grow. I'm going to be my best friend. And I can still have goals and be ambitious. Yeah, I don't have to beat myself up along the way. I'm going to bring in one little bit of neuroscience. I hope you guys love the neuroscience.
I'm
I love it, so I'm going to do it anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this is a study from Finland, from Helsinki. It's a super cool one where they, again, it's about functional MRI scanners, and they train people in compassion. As always, they showed them images of suffering, put them through a functional MRI scanner. Now, this was really fascinating because they saw the people trained in compassion. It not only, as we usually know, lit up the joy and reward areas, but it also lit up the supplementary motor cortex. So it primes you for action. Compassion primes you for action. If you look at the brain and you look at someone being compassionate, you are ready to move. You want to actually move into action. This is how it relates so nicely to motivation, and it keeps you going on the goal. Anyone will know this. If you're an entrepreneur, change maker, you're someone who's studying, you know your skill doesn't lie in getting it right first time. I mean, come on, this is crazy, right? It's just not true. It's practice, practice. What's the biggest block against practice? Well, it's our self-criticism and rumination. That stops us from practicing. I'll share one more story with you. Recently, I was learning how to handstand via some online courses. I love to train, and I get into calisthenics, and I thought, I'm going to learn how to handstand. Handstand in 30 days. I thought, great, I'll be able to do it. I failed. Took another course, I failed. Took another course, I failed. 9 months of me trying to do the handstands. And I asked myself, what can I learn? And like many people, I was undercommitted. I was doing other things. I didn't have like multiple days of handstand training. I didn't have a coach. So I invested in a handstand coach, and he helped me see things that I couldn't see. He got me videoing myself. I didn't want to do any of this stuff. I was like, I'm not doing the videos. Look, I resisted it. But what happened after about 6 months of practice, and I recorded myself hundreds of times. I failed thousands of times. Well, and not every time now, but I've hit 10-second handstands. And I would have never done that if not for self-compassion. I would have given up way too soon.
I think that's a great example. And also, you said you want to sort of achieve the results as well, and you want to be ambitious as well. At the same time, you don't want to beat yourself up. Is that also in some way related to sort of being focused on your action and enjoying the process while not being too obsessed with the outcome and really lowering the expectations, like what also, Buddhist teaching sort of says, right? You really lower expectation, you don't stop your work, and compassion, like, so lowering the expectation, doing your work, and being compassionate.
Yeah, thank you, BJ. So basically what you're asking is, does being compassionate help you focus on the process, right? That's what you're saying. I mean, guys, I know that many of you know this, but I'm just going to say it because I need to say this to myself. But there is nothing else apart from now. And we really have no control over whether that client's going to say yes, whether you're going to get that book deal, that podcast guest, whether your partner's going to say, you really don't have control over that. But you know what? That's so liberating. You have amazing control over the shift of your attention. You have amazing control over what you say to yourself. You have amazing control of your daily habits. So, there's a fantastic quote by Lao Tzu, and it's really guided my whole blog, everything that I do, which is, what's your thoughts, for they become your words. What's your words, for they become your actions. What's your actions, for they become your habits. What's your habits, for they become your character. And what's your character, for it becomes your destiny. I think the biggest problem we all face is not knowing where to focus the most powerful resource that we have, which is our attention.
That's beautiful. So tell me, how, and at this time, a lot of us are stressed, and anxiety level, I mean, all-time high right now, right? We all are going crazy. Is there any practical tips that you'd like to share on how people can sort of manage anxiety, and using whatever you have shared so far in this conversation?
Yeah, brilliant. I'm all about making it practical. I share, we shared neuroscience, we shared the wisdom, but ultimately growth mindset, neuroplasticity, it's all about practices. It's all about what you do day to day. So let's make it really simple. I just want to share with you that something really cool. I started to collect some data on the people that I was coaching. And the practices I'm going to share with you now have resulted in people on average forming 10 new positive habits. 100% of people shift their negative beliefs. They create 10 extra hours in their week because of the space they have to think. But this is the one I'm most proud of, is that we've inspired £35,000 in meaningful donations to causes. And that for me is, so what I'm about to share with you, I share it with a lot of love, also with a disclaimer that, when you really lean into this, it's extremely powerful and very, really has a lot of potential for you to feel more joy, freedom, and love. So if we think about the three aspects of compassion with others or yourself, so awareness of suffering, agreement with the meaning, and then last of all, action taken, okay? So possibly the most important thing for you to do, for anyone to do, is to become more aware of their emotional state. Okay, how do you do this? Well, I have an alarm. It goes off on my phone every hour, and all it says is check-in. Now, here's where we go deeper, and it gets really freaking interesting, really awesome, right? Because I'm just like you guys, and I ruminate. I think about the past and the future. Everyone does this. In fact, a Harvard study shows about 47% of the time our mind is wandering. There's nothing wrong with this, but at that moment you check in, it comes up on your phone. You ask yourself, how do I feel right now on a scale of 1 to 10? Or you might use a word, joy, love, freedom being 10, and 1 being despair, hopelessness, shame. And then when you score yourself, you then ask, what was I thinking about in that moment? And here's where it gets really interesting. You will find, and I challenge anyone to disagree with this, but you'll find that when you're anything less than a 10, it will be because you're thinking about the past or the future. So it's back to this process. And so the name of the game is presence, 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 presence. The more present you are, and presence feels like you'll feel alert, and you'll feel like you have good energy levels when you get into the present moment. You'll feel open, no resistance, and open to everything. And you might actually feel like a swelling of your heart or love. This is how the present moment feels. So, alarm on the phone and asking yourself 1 to 10 how you feel. And then, am I thinking about the past or the future? Very, very powerful. If you want to go to the next level of that, you can then, when you start to think about the past or the future, just ask this really powerful question, which I learned from a teacher called Mandy Morris, which is this even mine?
Wow.
Is this story even mine?
Really powerful. Most of the night, it's
Very
not
powerful.
ours. Yeah.
And this, I'm not saying that you absolve yourself from all responsibility. Of course, you can choose to respond in whatever way you want to that thought. But a lot of the beliefs that we have, they're here. They're in our lineage. And you can. It's a very quick way to shed some beliefs. Yeah. Okay, so that's the awareness. I'm just going to stick with that because I know I've gone quite deep, but it's a very powerful practice.
No, I'm loving it.
Now let's actually talk about. We mentioned just like me. I really want everyone to use that. Just like me, just like me. Or if you want to do it the other way around, when someone's speaking to you and you're wanting to be compassionate, 3 words, this makes sense. Always say that authentically, but honestly, if you've understood somebody's reasons for suffering, it will make sense. There's never a time, if you actually ask someone what's going on, why they're suffering, it will make sense. So let's talk about the actions. Now, I'm going to split these up into 3 main groups because I'm a big fan of making things easy to remember because it's a challenge, right? We're busy and we're stressed. So we've got auditory things, we've got visual things, and we've got kinesthetic things or movement things. And all of these self-compassionate practices are designed to slow down our heart rate, our breathing rate, engage what's called the rest nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. They slow down our brain waves. They get our neural chemistry into more care and love with oxytocin and endorphins. So auditory, and this may be, and this is actually very interesting, but we know this from ancient wisdom, it's been studied, that chanting, things like Om, words like Om, or there's a variety, I know many of you will know a variety of other chantings, or humming, or even vooshing, this sound, it's been shown to engage the vagus nerve, which again slows all of those biomarkers which I just mentioned. That's an auditory thing. But you know what I do sometimes? Is I just listen to some great music.
Yeah. I mean, I love coloring thing, and this is something that I've discovered really very very recently. Like this planner of mine came with 1 page of coloring sort of thing a month, and all I do is like once a month I just when I do that, I'm completely at that moment there, not thinking of anything else, just like oneness. I got to feel that. I've
Beautiful.
never thought that I'll discover something like coloring, doodles or something.
This is great. This is great. So this would be something in the visual. Can you think of anything, BJ, in the movement category that might make you feel?
So one of the things
good?
that I used to do when I was in in my college and I needed to sort of de-stress from my exam pressure was like just turn on really loud music, close my eyes, imagine as I was on stadium, performing in the stage, and I'll imagine thousands of people in front of me and just go crazy, as if I was the one who was there in the concert. I mean, that would just change the energy, and it was just amazing.
Guys, do you know, I'm just going to say this to every single person here who's listening, and I say this for myself and everyone. We have no idea how powerful we are. Just think about that for a minute. Think about how at any moment with training, you can shut your eyes and you can imagine yourself being anywhere that you have been before, or sometimes even imagine a place you haven't been before. Think about how absolutely incredible that is. And again, if we look at the brain, we can see that our imagined experience and our reality isn't really that different. And if you see it from an electrical level or a biochemical level, it isn't that different. So this is fantastic. It's so underutilized imagination, and I would strongly agree. So auditory, music, Kinesthetic would be any kind of movement. A good one I like to do is sometimes I just go and put my feet in the grass, and
that's a good one. Yeah.
I just kind of grounding. I sit there. I may do some breathing there. I may practice some handstands. Anything that I like, any kind of movement that just feels good. You know, if I watch my kids
squats, I mean, I love it.
Squats. They're always moving, they're dancing, they're just moving their body. It's like, we take life so seriously, you know? Like, we take life way too seriously. I appreciate if you're in the office, you don't want people to look at you weirdly. So in that case, the thing to do is just touch. So recently did a talk at Mind Valley University. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And this was the thing that stuck, which is just a hand on your heart. You can do that and no one will think that you're weird or anything odd's going on. If you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, think about what your mother or your father used to do for you when you were little. You got picked up, you got nurtured. So a hand on, so there's a few specific places: hands on hands, hands on heart, hands on stomach, or even hands on face. These are all very sensitive positions.
Like, you know, just wrap your hands around, you know, yourself as if, you know, you are hugging yourself, and that's a good one as well.
It's a huge one. It's a huge one. And the last, so we've done auditory, we've done movement, visual, nature. Nature knows, it's got amazing research. This isn't just woo-woo, guys, right? There's great research that shows, you know, you being out in nature naturally reduces cortisol, your stress hormone, and actually has effects on your immune system. When we measure immunoglobulins in the saliva and you measure it in the blood, incredible stuff. Natural killer cells, which help fight off viruses and help ward off cancer, improved in nature. But here's the thing: if you're living in a city or in an office, you're an executive, you can't get out in nature, even just looking at pictures of nature, or I see you've got a beautiful plant behind you, having plants around you, it has a beneficial effect. Remember, you have the power in that moment. You're feeling overwhelmed, you've checked in, you become mindfully aware. Now you have this great human ability, which is your ability to choose a different response. So I hope that helps. So the check-in, the just like me, and then thinking about the actions with visual, auditory, or movement.
This is like gold. This is just, you know, super powerful information, and I know that everybody who's listening, and if you guys go back and start implementing this, I'm sure you guys are gonna definitely, you know, see the change, because I have felt like some of those things that you've said like completely changed the way that I've been, you know, thinking and feeling at that moment, and it's, you know, it's really powerful. So we're towards the end of this conversation. Is there anything on compassion that we haven't discussed yet that you want to sort of share with the audience?
Yeah, there is. I'm going to add just one more thing to that, because I know people listening to this are like, Nilesh, I'm already doing those things. And what I say to that, and I say this with love, but you can always go deeper. You know, you can always go deeper. Are you really going and dredging up the stories? I'm doing this every day. Can you share what makes you uniquely gifted? Can you share what makes you feel in a good feeling? And are you able to maintain those good feelings? Is everything happening with synchronicities around you? But you can always go deeper. The one point about compassion I'd love to share is that this ultimately, the purpose of our life is to live a life of purpose. But what is purpose defined by? Well, it's giving. You know, in the Buddhist text, it says, do everything with one intention, which is either indirectly or directly do things for the benefit of others. Now, self-compassion is for the benefit of others, because our emotions are contagious. And when you feel so good, you watch the people around you change. It's really magical stuff. And so compassion makes you more giving. And like I mentioned, with the results we've had from the coaching, we've had £35,000 given in meaningful donations. So when you fully commit to loving yourself, loving those around you, you'll actually you'll feel more connected to the world and other people. and you'll start to see some really beautiful stories. I'll share one very briefly. One of my close friends who also does all my videos to me, he's incredibly gifted, and he hears me speak about compassion again and again and again. And we have a laugh and a joke because we say these things again. He told me this just such a beautiful story. He said that he was out with his daughter the other day in the town, and he went into London for the first time in a long time. And for the first time, he actually started to see more homeless people than he'd ever seen before. And he made it a point to give a coffee, and his daughter, who's I think 5, she went to go and give the coffee to the homeless person. And they shared that story with me with tears in their eyes. And it's because, like, imagine you, after you listen to this, you start practicing, you just see the world differently. You see people differently. So there's a study about that, but I won't go into it too
absolutely.
I'll get carried away.
And this is something that whenever we bring things to our awareness, all of a sudden it starts popping up, right? I mean, all of a sudden the whole world that was always there starts becoming more visible, that we start noticing things that we haven't. And I think that's what awareness does to us. Real quickly, I'm going to shoot you some questions and I want you to like answer them like a rapid fire, okay? What inspires you to do everything that you do?
Cool. My son.
You want to share a bit more?
He's my son. Yeah, my son had I just said that instinctively, that this is a story I didn't share, but he started to have developmental struggles, and with his problems with his brain development, he was slow to speak, he had behavioral problems, he was screaming randomly, and that really inspired me. And now my daughter as well, they both inspire me to be the best I can be. And I tell you what, if anyone has young kids, they are the greatest tools for presence because the moment you're thinking about your past or your future, they're screaming or they're doing something, and it's there to bring you back into the present moment. So my son really, and my daughter who's 1, they both
for the past few
inspire
months,
everything that I do.
I've just got a small pup, and nothing close to human child, but I know what you are saying. Like, this kid just puts me on my toes the whole time. So I know what you're saying.
It's very similar having a puppy and a child. It is actually very similar. And what you come to realize is all they want from you is your loving, connected presence. That's a lot.
And maybe I'm just getting prepared. Maybe I'll be better prepared when I have the actual human child. Three things that you think you would have done differently if you were to start this journey all over again.
Wow. Number 1 is I would have committed more to compassion. So now I've really gone deeper within it, and I just love that journey. But at the start, I started to have all the same things I shared with you. With I started to think about what other people would like. Would they like it? Do people really want to know about compassion? But in my heart, it was always a thing that was making me come alive. That's number 1. I would have fully committed. Number 2, a mistake if I do it differently would be enjoy the process. Enjoy the process. There were periods when I started on this journey, like I said, that I was growing because I was like, I need to be better. I need to be better. And actually just grow because you love to grow, because you enjoy that process, because we don't know what tomorrow might bring. We really don't know. And number 3, and this is one I'm working through right now, mistakes, is that never underestimate and, underappreciate your parents, your family, your caregivers, and your loved ones. And I think it's easy. We sometimes feel the most pain from our families, and just never forget that the best marker of your personal growth, I'm saying this for myself more than anyone, is how you show up with your families.
What is the number 1 wrong belief that you held for the longest period of time about yourself?
Oh, I'm glad you asked this question. That I was unlovable. And, I say that when I knew I had loads of people around me that told me that they loved me, but until I really found the reason for that and I pulled it out, and now I can gladly say it's different. But here's the thing about beliefs is that you can pull out the weeds, but they may still come, and that's okay. It's okay that it's continuous work. So I think I know that I'm not alone in that belief. I know there'll be people listening to this resonating just like me
as well. I felt I was unlovable. I felt that I was not worthy, and that was a big one. It took a lot of work to sort of, and like you said, it's work in the progress. It's constant awareness, and it's constant, reminding yourself and redirecting to, and gathering the positive proofs that I'm loved, I'm cared for, I'm taken care of, and I'm worthy, and just giving enough of those reasons for myself to believe those. I'm loving how open you are in sharing, and how vulnerable this conversation is. This is really great. Nilesh, you share crazy amount of content and compassion and high performance and how people can become really better. There are more than like 70-ish videos on your website just around this topic, and and I had a chance to go through some of those. People can definitely go there to learn more. I know that we've just scratched the surface in this podcast. There's so much that people can dive deeper into every single aspect that we have sort of discussed. People can definitely go to your videos on your website. They can go on your Instagram and LinkedIn. I'll link all of that on the description of this episode. Other than those, are there any books or any other resource that are on top of your sort of list where you, for the people who want to go deeper and and understand this topic that you want to direct to?
Wow, great question. Really, really great question. Yeah, I'm thinking right now because there are so many books that I love, and I think for me, I must recommend one of the really old spiritual texts, like either the Tao Te Ching or the Bhagavad Gita. I read the Stephen Mitchell translations of those, and I've read them multiple times. At times when things are hard, I go back to them. And that gives you clarity like nothing else. Because don't forget that this is wisdom from thousands and thousands of years distilled. So that's that. But about self-compassion, I would really recommend, and I actually interviewed her last night, and it's a book by Shauna Shapiro. She's a Stanford neuroscientist, and the book is called Good Morning, I Love You. The subtitle is Practices to Rewire Your Mind for Calm, Clarity, and Joy. I like that one because she explained things so simply with so many nuggets, and I'm sure if anyone reads it, they'll hear
great
what I was
suggestions,
talking
and
about
we
today.
have done an entire episode for the listeners who are interested in going deeper on Tao Te Ching concepts. We have done an episode 126, episode number 126 of this podcast. Listeners, you can go back and listen to that episode about Tao Te Ching, and there's a lot. We go deeper into that, so which is amazing. Okay, so here's the last question. Imagine you are standing in a stadium, and this is the largest stadium that has ever been built in the history of the world, and there are millions of people on that stadium, and you have been given only 1 minute of the time to share the most important lesson that you have learned in your life. What would be your message?
Wow. I think I would go with what I've said already that's authentic to me, which is don't grow because you need to be better. Grow because you love to grow. And give with all your heart. This is what you're here to do. To give your gifts that sit within all of us, that sit innate. And be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Because you never know who's watching, who's listening. You never know what tomorrow's going to bring. So these lessons are extremely powerful.
Be kind to yourself. On that note, Dr. Nilesh, Satguru, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was such a great conversation, and I know people who are listening to this conversation are as grateful as I am for you bringing these amazing insights and wisdom for our audience. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I must say as well, the way BJ structures the podcast and the way you've asked the questions and drawn out stories, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and you've made it practical as well. So, you guys are very lucky to be listening to BJ.
Thank you so much, and
in such a
that's
good way.
such a reassurance that's something that I need as well, because I often go into that cycle of, am I any good as an interviewer? And sometimes hearing back from the guests and also the listeners, that really, really helps. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.